Assalamu alaikum, second year students. Today we are going to do the ninth chapter of the novel Goodbye, Mr. Chips. In the previous chapter, as you remember, that the wife of Mr. Chips, that is Katherine Bridges, she passed away while giving birth to a child on 1st April. Now Mr. Chips, who was unexpected was unexpecting to marry a young, beautiful girl like Catherine Bridges, was also not expecting her too early a demise. But when she left, it affected his personality. Now, you may be in this chapter number 9, it is the effect of Catherine's death on Mr. Chips that has been discussed. Now, just like marriage had added something to his personality, so did the death of his wife. Now, what are those things? Untimely death of Catherine Bridges left indelible, ineradicable, unremovable marks on Mr. Chips' soul and body. He left his spacious, commodious apartment in Schoolhouse for his bachelor Carter. He was so dejected, he was so sad that he wanted to give up, to resign from his housemastership. But the head of Brookfield convinced him, persuaded him not to do so. And later he was glad that he did not give up the housemastership, because to fill up the emptiness, the vacuum that was created by the death of his wife was filled by the work. His bereavement, his grief, his loss had made him such a man that anybody could class him, could regard him as old. Physically, though he was strong enough to score a half century, but his graying hair had become noticeable with his loss. Actually, Chip's hair were graying for the past few years, but because of the vigor, because of the happiness that Catherine had brought into his life, that those graying hairs did not make him appear old. But the death of his wife had moved him so much that the inner sadness made people notice those gray hairs or a gray hair on his temple. So Mr. Chips could easily be classed, could easily be seen or remarked as or tagged as an old man by anyone who would see him. So the death of Catherine Bridges changed him or transformed him into an old man. Then we are introduced with the character of with Nelor. Now, who was Nelor? You may be asked in the question in the exams. Who was Nelor? Now, Nelor was basically a Brookfieldian, a student of Brookfield, and it was this boy who had first called Mr. Chips old after the death of Catherine Bridges. Nelor was the boy who had remarked on Chips half century. There should be an apostrophe. Who had remarked on Chips half century, not half bad for an old chap like him, or who had called Chips old at the age of 50. So when Chips had, it was when Catherine Bridges had died, Chips was 50 years old. Remember, when Chips had met her for the first time, he was 48, and it was the year 1896 when they had married. And then 2 years later, in 1898, Catherine Bridges died. Now, Chips was 50 at that time. And it was Nalor who had noticed Chip's gray hair and felt he was old, and he had said the same to him on his face. And now, when Mr. Chips was over 80 or at the age of 40, Mr. Chips recalled the Nellore incident with chuckles at Mrs. Wicket, and he wondered what Nellore would say about a man being old at 50 when he himself had become a lawyer and would be 50 years old. So Chips Nellore was a student of Mr. Chips, who had called him old at the age of 50, and it was he whom Chips recalled at Mrs. Wicket at the age of 80, and would think what Nellore would say uh, about a man about a 50 years old man when Nellore himself would be 50 himself. Then we are introduced with Halsey. Now these characters are important from the point of view of short question answers and MCQs. So you must remember these characters. Now, who was Halsey? Halsey was a lawyer, and he had died at the age of 99, and he became a chancellor at the age of 82. Now, while recalling Nellore's terming Mr. Chips an old man at the age of 50, Mr. Chips remembered Halsey, and he would say that Mr. Chips was just an infant at the age of 50 when Nellore had called him old. So Halsey and Nellore and Mr. Chips. Okay, so basically Halsey was a lawyer. He was a chancellor he became a chancellor at the age of 82, and he died at what age? 99. Now, while sitting at Mrs. Wicket's home, Mr. Chips used to recall Nellore, who had called him old at the age of 50. Okay? And Mr. Chips also recalled Halsey because of his age. And he would say rather, that at that time, in 1898, when Nellore had called him old, at that time he was just an infant, a young child. Then, after 1898, 1898, Mr. Chips kept on living his life as usual. However, with the turning of the century, with the change of century, with the new century, certain changes came in the personality of Chips. Okay, the first change was his jokes and habits joined into a single harmony, into a single strand. His jokes became more rich. His jokes became more popular. Then he no longer had occasional disciplinary problems or feeling of diffidence about his work and worth, or feeling of diffidence about his work and worth. Okay, or feeling of diffidence. So he no longer has disciplinary problems or diffidence about his work and worth. Then his pride in Brookfield reflected back. He had won by seniority and ripeness an uncharted no man's land of privilege, right to eccentricities. For example, he wore his gown too tattered to hold. So it was with age as well that Mr. Chips won the right to do things which others were not allowed to. Okay, an example is the tattered gown which he used to wear. It was too tattered, it was too worn out that it could not be even held together on a windy day. So these were the changes which new century brought in his personality. Then, what was the favorite subject of mimicry throughout the school? What was the favorite subject of imitation? What the school children at Brookfield would imitate popularly, in, and that was chips. Chips. That was chips taking call over. Okay, Mr. Chips used to stand on the wooden bench by big hall steps with long school list, and each boy would pass, speaking his own name for Chips to verify and then tick off on the list. That verifying glance was an easy and favorite subject of mimicry throughout the school. And what was that glance? Wearing steel rimmed glasses, spectacles, slipping down the nose, eyebrows lifted, one a little higher than other, a gaze half rapt, half quizzical. So that verifying glance of Mr. Chips, which he had, or which he used to had, or while taking the call over of the students by big hall steps, was the favorite topic of mimicry or imitation throughout the school. Mr. Chips on that occasion uh, used to hold the curl sheet of students list, and wearing a tattered gown, he would look at each boy as he passed by, calling his name loudly, and Mr. Chips would look at him to verify whether the boy is the one, whether the boy is speaking or saying his own name, or he is trying to mark the proxy of some other student. So on that occasion, the glance, the look which he had, or the way he would look at the boys, was the one which was the favorite subject of mimicry. Okay, then moving on to the next slide, you may be asked about George Lloyd and Mr. Chips meeting. Now, Mr. Chips had Lloyd George was invited as the guest of honor at Brookfield Speech Day. On that occasion, Mr. Chips had remarked that he remembered Mr. George as a young man and confessed that George had improved a lot. Now, this remark of Chips to George shocked the head who was standing beside Mr. George, but Mr. Lyle George, he did not take those remarks seriously. He simply laughed, and on that day, Mr. Lyle George spoke most of the time with Mr. Chips. And we are told that the novelist that at that time, Mr. Chips had been granted the right to say anything to anyone out of out of respect which used to be given to him because of his age, because of his ripeness. So students, this is the chapter number 9, and with this we come to the end of chapter number 9. Then there are a number of words for vocabulary in this chapter for you to memorize. A few words are the ones which you are very much familiar with, but there are few more words which I would like you to note down and write down the meaning or synonyms of which. The very first word is keenness. Now, what is keenness? It's not a new word for you. Keenness means enthusiasm or eagerness. Keenness, enthusiasm or keenness. Commodious. Commodious means spacious. commodious apartment, spacious apartment. Bereavement. Next word is bereavement. Bereavement means great loss through death. Okay, great loss through death. The next word is stupor. Stupor means a half-conscious state. Trance, neem behoshi. A half-conscious state, neem behoshi. Stupor. So bereavement means सदमा जो किसी की मौत से या किसी महरूमी से होता है, usually मौत के लिए इस्तेमाल होता है. Stupor, trance. Then chuckle. Chuckle means to laugh quietly. To laugh quietly. Quizzical. Quizzical means inquiring, questioning. Okay. The next word is randomness. Randomness means haphazard, having no pattern, haphazard, following no pattern, no order. Bequeath. Bequeath means to pass on, to pass on, to give, to left behind by the way of hereditary for the people left behind. Bequeath. In Urdu we say versa, versa mein chhodna. Mellowness. Mellowness means ripeness. Here it is used in the sense of maturity. It can be used in the sense of maturity. In mellowness means ripeness. Something is, when something is mellow, it means it is softened. Or when you want someone to speak a little to lower down the volume, you may say mellow down the volume. Diffident. This is not a new word. I had told you we have learned this word earlier as well. It is opposite of confident. Diffident means diffident means to have have less confident. Okay, it's an opposite of confident. Unconfident, you may say. Persuade. Persuade means to convince someone. To convince. Rapt. Rapt means engrossed, absorbed. Okay? Engrossed, absorbed. Beguile. Beguile means to cheat someone, to deceive. To deceive, to cheat. Poise. Poise means calmness. Calmness or serenity. Harmony. Harmony, it's a very common word. What does it mean? It means pleasing combination. Pleasing combination. Uncharted. Uncharted. Uncharted means unknown, which is not charted, which is not mapped. Unmapped, unknown. Privilege. Privilege is the advantage. Privilege is an advantage which someone one wins by the way of by way of some possession, or by because of someone's age or birth or gender. Privilege, advantage. Mystic. Mystic is spiritual. Ritual. Ritual is ceremony, custom. Mimicry, imitation, to copy, imitation. Heretical. Heretical means non-conformist. Heretical means non-conformist, who does not confirm the convention. Then eccentricity. Eccentricity means particularity. Eccentricity means specific, particular habit of an individual. A habit which a person has, and that habit is very much his personal. You may say Peculiarity, you may say a particular habit, oddness. Tattered. Tattered means torn. तार तार हुआ होना, torn. Abandonment. Abandonment means renunciation, to surrender, to resign. Verify. Verify means to confirm, to authenticate. August. August means shocked, horrified, terrified, shocked. Gaze. To look at something for a longer time. That is to stare. To stare, to look for a longer time at something. Chorus. Chorus is referred to a group of people who sing together. Chorus, group of people singing together. I hope you have followed today's lecture and have written down the meanings of these words. Now, what you are supposed to do is to memorize, is to learn by heart the question answers of this chapter along with the vocabulary. Good day. Thank you very much. Allah Hafiz.